In a place where the sun burns red over dusty roads, a young girl and her mother arrive in a city that will not welcome them. They carry nothing but a past filled with grief and a secret that could ruin anyone who gets too close. When a kind stranger offers his friendship, he doesn't know that trust can be the most dangerous gift of all. Stay with me to hear the full story. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. The air was thick with the scent of burning sage and red earth. Women stood in a wide circle, their heads wrapped in bright cloth, their voices rising and falling in a song older than memory. The men beat the drums slow and heavy, the rhythm like a heartbeat, one that was fading. In the center lay Amina's father. His body was wrapped in white cotton, the kind that frayed if you touched it too long. Amina knelt beside him, her small hands pressed to the ground. She didn't cry. In her village, tears at a burial were considered an invitation for the spirit to linger. Fatima, her mother, stood tall beside her. Her eyes were dry, but her lips trembled each time the wind shifted and carried the smell of smoke. The elder stepped forward, holding a carved wooden staff. He raised it to the sky and spoke in a voice roughened by years of dust and sun. Today we return one of our own to the earth. May his spirit walk in the shade, and may his enemies be blinded to his path. The crowd answered in unison, their voices a low hum. The drums stopped. Amina looked at her father's face one last time before the cloth was pulled over it. Her fingers brushed against the amulet around his neck, a small bead strung on leather. She slipped it into her pocket. No one saw. When the burial was done, the village moved on. That's how it always was. But that night, as the fire cracked and the air cooled, Fatima sat beside her daughter and spoke for the first time since morning. "We leave tomorrow," she said. Amina turned to her. "To the city?" Fatima nodded. "There is no place for us here now, and there are people who will not forget or forgive." Amina didn't ask who she meant. She knew. In the flicker of the firelight, her mother's face looked like stone. The bus wheezed as it pulled into the station, coughing out a cloud of black exhaust that settled over the cracked pavement. Amina stepped down first, clutching a cloth bag to her chest. Inside were 2 dresses, a pair of sandals, and the amulet she'd taken from her father's neck. Fatima followed, her posture straight despite the long journey. The sun here felt different, harsher, without the wind of the plains to soften it. The city was noise and movement. Men shouting over the prices of yams, women balancing baskets on their heads, motorbikes weaving between narrow streets. They walked the last stretch to the building that would be their home. It stood 4 stories tall, painted once in yellow, now faded to the color of old maize. The corridors smelled faintly of kerosene and damp cloth. Neighbors peeked from their doors as they passed. Some nodded politely. Most didn't. Their apartment was small. 1 room, a stove that groaned when lit, and a window that looked out onto the laundry lines of the next building. Fatima set down her bag and exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath since they left the village. That evening, Amina wandered into the corridor. The walls echoed differently here, sounds traveling longer before fading. She almost didn't notice the man locking his door across the hall. He looked up, surprised to see her. "New here?" he asked. Amina hesitated, then nodded. Her voice was barely above the hum of the building's generator. "Yes." They stood in a small pause, the kind that can close or open a door between people. Finally, she asked, "Is it quiet here?" He smiled faintly. "If you don't count the neighbors who love making up stories about other people's lives." For the first time since she'd left the village, Amina smiled back. The building's rooftop wasn't meant for visitors. A rusted padlock hung from the door, but it had long since stopped working. You only had to twist the handle a certain way, and it would give. That night, the city was quieter than usual. The distant hum of motorbikes, the occasional shout from a street vendor below, all softened by the warm night air. Amina stood at the edge, looking out at the sea of rooftops, their corrugated metal catching the moonlight. The narrator stepped out behind her, carrying 2 enamel mugs. One steamed with black tea, the other sweetened with condensed milk. "You drink tea in the village?" he asked, handing her the sweeter one. She took it, nodding. But not like this. At home, it's strong enough to keep you awake all night. My father would boil it until the water turned black. There was a pause, the kind where words hover just behind the lips. Then she went on. On the nights before planting season, everyone in our village would gather. We'd drink tea, and the elders would tell stories about the first rains, about the spirits in the hills. My father always told the loudest stories. He said the louder you tell them, the more the spirits listen. Her voice faltered at the word father, but she kept looking at the city lights. Do you miss it? He asked. She thought for a long moment. I miss when I didn't know people could lie to you and still smile at you the next morning. The narrator wanted to ask who had lied to her, but something in her tone made him hold back. Instead, he said, here in the city, people don't wait for planting season to tell stories. They make them up every day. You just have to be careful which ones you listen to. She glanced at him then, her eyes catching the light. And which ones you tell, she said quietly. Below, in the street, a group of men began singing, slow, layered harmonies in a language neither of them used in daily life. The song rose and fell like a tide, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke from a nearby food stall. They stood there until the mugs were empty, the night air cooling between them. The courtyard smelled of grilled maize and spiced meat. Someone had strung colored bulbs between the balconies, their soft light pooling over the cracked cement. It wasn't a festival, not officially, just the kind of night when the older women brought out their cooking pots, and the younger men carried drums down from their flats. Fatima stood near one of the tables, her headscarf tied in a neat knot at the nape of her neck. Her hands moved quickly, folding flatbreads for the children who circled like restless birds. She laughed when one of them tried to sneak an extra piece, but her eyes kept scanning the crowd. Amina stayed close to the narrator. Her dress was plain, but she'd added a necklace of thin copper wire, the kind she might have made herself. The sound of the drums pulled her into a slow sway, her steps soft but certain. Do you dance? The narrator asked. In the village, yes, she said, smiling. Here, I don't know the rules yet. They found a spot near the drummers. The rhythm was steady at first, then faster, sharper. The air filled with the clapping of hands, the stomp of feet against cement. Someone started a call-and-response song, the words old enough that not everyone understood them, but everyone knew how to answer. In the middle of the song, a voice rose behind them. It was Kofi, a man from the second floor, broad-shouldered, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He leaned against the wall, watching Amina. Your mother works hard, he said to her. Must be nice to have someone help her. Amina's smile faded. The narrator stepped slightly closer to her. She has help, he said evenly. Good neighbors can be that. Kofi's gaze lingered a beat too long before he turned back into the crowd. Fatima noticed. When the narrator and Amina came over to her table later, she placed a plate in front of him. Eat, she said, her tone warm, but her eyes carried a silent question he couldn't quite read. The night went on with music and laughter, but something in the air had shifted. The colored bulbs swayed gently above, their light catching on faces that smiled too easily and eyes that watched too closely. The power had gone out again. It was late, and the building's generator had been quiet for hours. In the soft glow of a kerosene lamp, shadows stretched long across the walls. The narrator sat cross-legged on the floor. Amina leaned against the wall opposite him, the amulet from her father turning slowly in her fingers. Does it help? He asked, nodding toward the bead. She looked down at it. Sometimes. In my village, we believe that if you carry something from the one you've lost, you carry their shadow too. It protects you, or it warns you. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were somewhere far away. He waited. Finally, she spoke again, softer now. My father died during planting season. It was sudden, a sickness. But some people said it was no sickness at all, that someone wanted him gone. Why? Amina's hand tightened around the amulet. He was the one who spoke at the meetings. The one who told the elders not to sell the land by the river. He said the river belonged to everyone, not just the men with money. The lamplight flickered, making her face shift between shadow and light. After he died, there were whispers, she went on. They said my mother took something that wasn't hers. That's why she kept her head high at the burial, to show she wasn't afraid. But I think she was. The narrator leaned forward. Is that why you came here? Amina nodded once. Here, no one knows those stories. But stories, they always find a way to travel. For a moment, neither spoke. From somewhere outside, the distant sound of a drum carried through the night air, slow, like a heartbeat. The morning heat pressed against the building like a hand. In the courtyard, a small crowd had gathered around the laundry lines, their voices sharp and overlapping. The narrator stepped outside and caught fragments. For the roof repairs. It was their last night. Someone took it. An envelope had gone missing. The one where the tenants kept contributions for fixing the leaking roof before the rains came. The manager, a thin man with a permanent frown, held the empty box where it had been kept. Kofi leaned against the wall, watching the crowd like a man enjoying a good story. Then his voice cut through the noise. I saw her. The new girl. She came out of this room late, after everyone had gone to bed. The heads turned almost in unison toward Amina, who had just stepped into the courtyard with Fatima. Her face went pale, and her mother's hand tightened on her arm. That's not true, Fatima said, her voice low but firm. Kofi shrugged, the picture of casual certainty. Maybe I was mistaken, but I know what I saw. The narrator moved through the crowd. You're wrong, he said to Kofi, his tone steady. She wouldn't take it. A few people muttered, others exchanged glances. The manager gave a short, dismissive nod. We'll ask again when everyone's here tonight. The crowd dispersed slowly, but the air stayed heavy. Neighbors glanced at Amina in quick, darting looks as they passed. And when the narrator caught her gaze, he saw something he couldn't quite name. Not fear exactly, but the weight of someone who had stood in this kind of circle before. By the time the sun dropped, the air in the courtyard had cooled, but the tension hadn't. Lanterns hung from nails in the walls, throwing yellow light over the gathered faces. The manager stood in the center, the empty contribution box at his feet. We need to be clear, he began, before the rains come and the roof starts leaking over our heads. Amina stood beside Fatima, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her gaze stayed low, fixed somewhere near her sandals. Kofi spoke first. I said what I saw. She came out of the room where the money was kept. Late. No one else was around. Fatima's voice cut in. My daughter would never steal from you. The manager's eyes moved to the narrator. You've spoken for her before. You know her better than most here. What do you think? All eyes turned to him. The night air felt heavier, thicker. He cleared his throat. I think, he said slowly, that someone's making up a story because it's easier than finding the truth. And I know she didn't take it. A ripple went through the crowd. Not relief, but something sharper. Murmurs rose. Why so sure? He's protecting her. Maybe they both know where it went. Kofi's smile widened, just enough for the narrator to see. The manager raised a hand for silence. We'll ask again tomorrow. Maybe something will come to light. The circle broke apart, neighbors heading for their doors in small knots. The narrator caught Amina's eye, hoping for a flicker of gratitude. Instead, she looked away quickly, as if the very act of meeting his gaze might cost her something. The next morning, the courtyard was quieter than usual. No children playing, no music from open windows, just the slow drip of a leaking tap somewhere nearby. The narrator was halfway down the stairs when the manager's voice called up from below. Come here. You need to see this. He followed the sound to the small storage room where the contribution box had been kept. Inside, Kofi stood with his arms folded, looking like a man who'd been waiting for this moment. On the bench near the wall lay a scrap of paper. The edges were torn, the writing smudged, but it was enough to see the list of groceries in the narrator's handwriting. Flour, tea, oil. Recognize this? The manager asked. Yes, the narrator said, frowning. It's mine. I threw it away days ago. Kofi's voice slid in smoothly. Funny, isn't it? How it ended up right here, in the room with the money. The narrator looked between them. This proves nothing. Anyone could have taken it from the trash and put it here. Maybe, the manager said. but it's the only thing we've found so far." As he left the storage room, the narrator caught sight of Amina at the far end of the hall. She stood very still, watching. When their eyes met, she didn't smile, didn't frown, just turned and walked away. That night, the building was restless. Footsteps echoed in the hallway long after the generator cut out. The narrator lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, until a soft knock broke the quiet. Amina stood at his door, a small oil lamp in her hand. The light made her face look both older and younger at once. "Can I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside. She set the lamp on the table, its flame bending in the draft from the window. "They found your list today," she said. "I know," he replied. "They think it proves something." Her eyes searched his face, as if weighing his words against something she already believed. "You didn't take it," she said at last. It wasn't a question. "And you?" he asked. "Did you?" Amina didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the window, looking out into the dark courtyard. "When I was little," she began, "my father told me, if you want to survive in a place where people are watching, you have to choose who you stand beside before the fire starts. Then you stay there, no matter how hot it gets." "That's not an answer," he said. She turned, the lamplight catching on the amulet in her hand. "Sometimes the answer doesn't matter as much as the choice." For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then she picked up the lamp and left, the flame bobbing in the hallway until it disappeared. The next day was thick with heat, the kind that slowed every movement. The narrator was coming back from the market when he saw Fatima at the stairwell, folding laundry into a neat stack. She looked up as he passed. "You've been kind to my daughter," she said, her voice calm but edged. "I only told the truth," he replied. Fatima's hands kept moving, shaking out a sheet before folding it sharply. "Kindness is a dangerous thing," she said, "especially when people decide it must mean something more." He frowned. "Is this about what Kofi said?" Her eyes met his for the first time. "This is about the fact that people have already chosen the story they want to tell. And you are in it, whether you like it or not." "Then tell them it isn't true," he said. Fatima gave a small, almost pitying smile. "You think they would listen to me? They have already put my family on one side of the fire. You are on the other." She gathered the folded laundry and turned toward her door. As she walked away, she added without looking back, "Be careful. Flames don't care who started them." The evening heat was still heavy when the narrator carried his rubbish down to the shared bins in the courtyard. The smell of cooking oil and smoke hung in the air, mixing with the sour scent of the trash. He lifted the lid of the nearest bin and froze. On top of a pile of crumpled flyers lay a paper bag. Not just any bag. The same kind Amina had brought him that first night, bread, jam, and a thank you note inside. His hand trembled as he reached for it. Inside the bag was an envelope. The seal had been torn open. It was empty. On the front, in bold black letters, was his name. He stood there, staring at it, the dim light from the courtyard lamp flickering overhead. It could have been planted. It could have been a mistake. But it could also mean exactly what it looked like. Somewhere above him, a window closed softly. When he looked up, he thought he saw a shadow move behind Amina's curtain. He didn't knock gently. The sound of his fist against her door echoed through the corridor, sharp and urgent. Amina opened it after a moment, her face unreadable. The room behind her was dim, lit only by a small oil lamp on the table. "We need to talk," he said. She stepped aside. The air inside smelled faintly of smoke and tea. He placed the paper bag and the empty envelope on the table between them. Her gaze flickered down, then back to his face. She didn't look surprised. "Where did you find it?" she asked. "In the trash," he replied. "Your bag, my name, and nothing inside." Amina's fingers brushed the amulet at her neck. "I told them you were the one who defended me," she said. "That you were safe." His voice tightened. "Safe? You set me up." Her eyes stayed locked on his. "I did what I had to do. For my mother. For us. There is no us if you're willing to burn me to save yourself." She stepped closer, her voice low. "They were going to choose someone. If it wasn't you, it would have been me. And if it was me, we would be out on the street, and my mother would have nothing." He shook his head, feeling the heat rise in his chest. "You could have told me." Her mouth curved in something between a smile and a grimace. And what would you have done? Told them the truth? That would have just made them believe it more. The lamp flickered between them, throwing shadows that made her eyes look darker, harder. For the first time since he'd met her, he saw no trace of the girl who had smiled on the rooftop. The courtyard was already full when he stepped outside. Lanterns swung overhead, casting restless light over the faces turned toward him. The air smelled of kerosene and dust. The manager stood in the center, the empty envelope in his hand like a judge's gavel. "We have our answer," he said. "This man was found with proof in his possession. The money is gone, and the rains are coming." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kofi leaned against the wall, arms folded, his mouth tilted in satisfaction. He looked for Amina. She stood near the back, beside Fatima, her face still and unreadable. She didn't move toward him. She didn't speak. "This is ridiculous," he said to the manager. "You know this could have been planted." The manager's voice was firm. "Maybe, but there is no one else with so many ties to this. Your list, your bag, your name on the envelope. What would you have us believe?" The crowd pressed in, their eyes hungry for a conclusion. "Pack your things," the manager said. "You leave tonight. The building will be safer without you." Someone grabbed his arm, steering him toward the stairs. He glanced over his shoulder one last time. Amina was watching. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, and then she looked away. He had almost convinced himself it was another life. 2 years in another town, another job, another small room with a window facing the street. Faces faded, voices blurred. Only the memory of the courtyard sometimes returned in dreams. Then, one late afternoon, he saw her. Amina was standing in line at a small grocery shop, a basket on her arm. Her hair was longer now, tied back with a bright scarf. She wore a simple dress, clean and pressed. Beside her stood a boy, maybe 8 years old, holding her hand. She didn't see him at first. He noticed the way she counted her coins, slow and careful, the way her mother used to fold laundry. When she turned, their eyes met. No surprise, no guilt, just recognition, like opening a book to a page you'd read long ago. They didn't speak. She paid for her groceries, thanked the cashier, and walked toward the door. As she passed, the boy looked up at him and smiled. Quick, knowing, the same way she had smiled in the hallway that first week. Outside, he followed at a distance, unable to stop himself. She reached a parked car. In the driver's seat was Kofi. He said something that made her laugh softly before she got in. Kofi glanced in the mirror, and their eyes met. He nodded once, almost politely, before starting the engine. The car pulled away into the dusk. And just like that, the pieces fell into place. It had never been just about survival. She had chosen her side long before they met. He had simply been the easiest piece to remove from the board.